Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another informative and fun webinar presented by Heritage Ohio. Today we have two wonderful designers from Sherwin-Williams who are going to share the history of color. We have Laura, who started her career at Sherwin-Williams in 2014 as a color expert in the store. Most recently, she leads the team of virtual color consultants in the Midwest region as a marketing manager. We're also joined by Cindy today, who has a background in fine art, muralism, and graphic design, who joined Sherwin-Williams in 2002 and has worked in many areas of the color program, including managing design teams and all forms of customer support. This webinar is presented in part thanks to generous support from the Ohio Arts Council and Ohio Department of Development. If you like the webinar and want to learn more about the series, please join us on June 14th, 2023, as we celebrate Pride Month and recognize the contributions of the LGBTQ community to Ohio. Our webinar in that day will focus on the history of Summit Station. It was the first and longest running lesbian bar in Ohio, having opened in 1980. In 2022, it received the third historic marker from the State Preservation Office as an important LGBTQ site. But today we're going to talk about the history of color and how it can transform a building and how to pick appropriate colors for the period of your property. So Laura and Cindy, thank you so much for joining us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you for having us, and thank you for that introduction. I'll dive a little bit more into our backgrounds here. Again, I began with Sherwin-Williams in 2014 as a color expert in the store, and as you said, I'm a marketing manager leading the team of virtual color consultants in the Midwest division. My passion and my goal is to continue to develop and educate a team of color professionals. And in my spare time, I love going to the beach with my two kiddos.
Hi, and I'm Cindy. I know you know a little bit about me from what Matt read, but I am working right now with customers via virtually to help them develop color palettes. So I am actually at the point of decision making and exploring of colors. So that's very real for me right now, though I've held many different roles in the color program. I also really love history. I have a passion for Victorian and Deco items of all kinds, but particularly fashion and accessories. So hopefully between the two of us, we'll give you an interesting presentation today.
Well, today we'll be talking about the history behind Sherwin-Williams, how we truly cover the earth, color through the decades.
The Sherwin-Williams story begins in 1866, when a 24-year-old man arrived in Cleveland, entered the paint industry, and set about revolutionizing it. Within a few short years, Henry Sherwin would invent the first ready-mixed paint and the resealable paint can. In 1890, Sherwin-Williams introduces a line of marine finishes, 19 years before the Titanic is even built. In 1905, the company introduces its long-standing Cover the Earth logo. The 20s are a time for global expansion and global recognition. The company's line of aviation coatings would be used on some of the most historic flights of the 20th century. In 1941, Sherwin introduces Chemtone, a revolutionary new paint that doesn't require primer or sealer. It sells 3 million gallons in its first year. When the men leave for the front lines, Sherwin-Williams hires the first women fillers and cappers to keep production lines rolling. In 1961, the company introduces a paint can shaker that can mix 5-gallon containers, enabling customers to buy paint in larger quantities. 1977, sales top $1 billion. 1992, the company opens its 2000th store. Sherwin-Williams helps to repaint the Pentagon after 9/11, donating 10,000 gallons to the restoration effort. The company's products come to protect and embellish many of America's most iconic landmarks and beloved assets. In 2011, Sherwin-Williams is nationally recognized for its low VOC soybean PET formulation. In 2015, it launches Paint Shield, the first EPA-registered paint with the power to kill bacteria. And in 2017, Sherwin-Williams completes the largest acquisition in its history. "150 years of heritage, 150 years of innovation, 150 years of performance."
Once stated, what is worth doing is worth doing well. Clearly, the ambition led him to success. Let's start by exploring a little bit more behind the history of the colorful empire that he created. After working as a clerk and a bookkeeper in Cleveland for 6 years, Henry Sherwin wanted something more in life to match his drive. By 1866, he accumulated nearly $2,000, and he decided he considered banks, but ultimately he chose to invest that money into, guess what, a paint operation with Truman and Durman and Company, an importer of home decoration and furnishing supplies. They also provided products associated with painting, such as varnishes, linseed oil, pigments, and paints. In 1869, Dunham made a shift to focus on manufacturing, which provided the opportunity for Henry to dissolve his partnership with them and create a new one. He had partnered with Mr. E.P. Williams and Mr. A.T. Osborne in 1870, and they took over Dunham's retail operations. In 1871, the newly formed Sherwin-Williams began to mix its first paints. By 1873, the company had by purchasing its first factory, and they were able to start producing and selling ready-made paints. This amazing journey created the Sherwin-Williams Company that still exists today. In the beginning, paint was made by mixing all ingredients by hand. It was tedious and the product was unstable. Sherwin could see that there was a need for a pre-packaged, stable liquid that could be tinted with the consistency and quality that his customers could count on. He knew that this was a way to distinguish his company from their competitors. He sent his team to work tirelessly on this over the next 10 years. In 1876, they helped design and build a machine that could render pigments finely and uniform enough to be used in an automated operation. In 1850, as you can see here in the picture, which was hand sealed and affixed with a label that read SWP 355, and it became known as Shade K. Sherwin-Williams could now provide reliable his best-selling exterior house paint. And as we know, this was just the beginning. Sherwin was not only the first to manufacture such products, but it was also understood that color was key in the paint industry. They put a great effort to lead the industry in design, making them the first stop for color advice, which still holds true to this day. In 1910, the company began offering The Home Decorator, a promotional magazine distributed in stores that offered advice on virtually all facets of home decorating. This gave Sherwin-Williams customers a better understanding and more confidence to do their projects in their homes. By the year 1940, Sherwin-Williams was able to produce over 2,000 colors.
By taking a closer look at our historical palettes, we can begin to understand the story behind the colors and how they evolved over time. Victorian era encompassed the 1830s to the 1910s. Opulent and ornate are great descriptors of the Victorian period. The introduction of synthetic dyes in the mid-1850s opened a range of new colors to explore. Wallpaper, textiles, and elaborately embellished furniture pieces were the leading hallmarks of Victorian decor. This ornamentation continued to the exterior, which opened a great opportunity for creative expression. There were two distinct color palettes in the Victorian era. Early on, the popular palette was derived from nature, with pigments made from ground organic matter. One notable contributor to this movement was Andrew Jackson Downing. You can actually see his name lives on in many of our historic color names. He was a trendsetter that put his design stamp on the classic Victorian color scheme for exterior palettes. Downing was a naturalist and a landscape architect more than a color specialist. He believed in the power of the color found in our natural surroundings and that Victorian homes should incorporate these colors into their exteriors unadulterated. In addition, at this time, it was more expensive to create bright and elaborate color pigmentations for paint. So a more cost-effective and easily available alternative was to grind up natural elements such as plant life, barks, rock, all from the surrounding areas to help blend into the paints. This created many of the browns, olives, deep greens, and ochres that are still popular today. However, the most recognizable palette of this era, and referred to as the counterculture to the Downing style, was to bring multiple rich and bold shades to the color scheme. Oftentimes they were contrasting from opposite sides of the color wheel to create maximum impact. Reds were paired with greens and golds with purples. These exotic saturated pigmentations were expensive and harder to acquire at this time, so it ended up being reserved for those who could afford it. Let's take a look at our historical Victorian palettes. Here we have the earth toned, which were soft and subdued. We've got the Downing earth, the Downing slate. We know why it's named that. And then we have these bold and contrasting, highly saturated colors that were, like I said, a little more expensive and maybe reserved for those who could afford those materials. So these homes were built in the late 1800s and early 1900s during the Victorian and Edwardian period of time. They were painted in 3 or more colors to embellish or enhance their architectural details, a true reflection of Victorian flourish and opulence. About 48,000 houses in the Victorian and Edwardian style were built in San Francisco between 1849 and 1815. As one newspaper critic noted in 1885, red, yellow, chocolate, orange, everything that is loud is in fashion. If the upper stories are not red or blue, they're painted in panels of yellow or brown. Sadly, during World War I and World War II, many of these houses were painted battleship gray with war surplus navy paint. Another 16,000 were demolished, and many others had their Victorian decor stripped off or covered with tar paper, brick, stucco, or aluminum siding. It took the creativity of the 60s and 70s to revitalize these magnificent homes to their former beauty. Now, I'm sure you recognize this picture. It's an icon of American architecture called the Painted Ladies. These houses were built between 1892 and 1896 by developer Matthew Cavanaugh, who lived next door in the 1892 mansion at 722 Steiner Street. This block appears very frequently in media and mass market photographs of the city. It is a popular tourist attraction and has appeared in an estimated 70 movies, TV programs, and ads. These are one of the best known groups of painted ladies called Postcard Row in San Francisco. You can find painted ladies in many other areas, including our own Cincinnati, Ohio. Here's Ohio's own Painted Ladies. Located between 2 rivers, the Miami and Ohio, this prosperous steamboat building town is the oldest city in Cincinnati, founded in 1788. It boasts many historical homes, with the oldest home still standing, which was built in 1804. Before we leave, let's take a look at a few other eye-catching Victorian beauties. How about that pink one with all the icing? Love it. That's my favorite. I have a dress that looks like that. All right. On to the arts and crafts movement. Here we go. As a counter trend to the excessive ornamentation of the Victorian era, the arts and crafts movement embodied honesty and craftsmanship, celebrating the joys of nature, earth, and home, with colors that range from simple off-whites to rich, warm, neutral tones. When these hues prevailed, an emphasis on organic beauty, harmony, and the American way took the spotlight. The arts and crafts movement, originating in England in 1860 and moving to the United States in 1880, overlapped the Victorian era. Embracing both earth tones from the early Victorian and the deep saturated colors of the later, it is the perfect blend of the two. A closer look into the aesthetic of this look reveals a strong belief in connection forged between the artist and his work through handcraft, producing fulfillment and beautiful items that would be useful on an everyday basis. Influenced primarily by imagery of nature and the forms of medieval art, particularly the Gothic style, which enjoyed a revival in Europe and North America during the mid-19th century. During the latter part of the decade, influences shifted towards more primary colors and eventually making way to khaki, navy blue, and brown. These colors were popular during World War I, when the supply of dyes used for clothing was cut off from Germany, limiting access to more colorful options. I do have a few pictures here to illustrate the arts and crafts movement. I also put in a picture of a William Morris botanical motif wallpaper to give you a feeling for how we were connecting to the natural beauty around us, but having it a little more stylized. All right. So one of the most influential people during this movement was, of course, Frank Lloyd Wright. He was an American architect, interior designer, writer, and educator who designed more than 1,000 structures, 532 of which were completed. Wright believed in designing structures that were in harmony with humanity and its environment, a philosophy he called organic architecture. In addition to his houses, Wright designed original and innovative offices, churches, schools, skyscrapers, hotels, museums, and more. He often designed interior elements for these buildings as well, including furniture and stained glass. He wrote 20 books and many articles and was a popular lecturer in the United States and in Europe. He was recognized in 1991 by the American Institute of Architects as the greatest American architect of all time, and his creative period spanned more than 70 years. We do have some Frank Lloyd Wrights here in Ohio. I thought I would share those with you. I don't know if any of you have ever gotten a chance to take a look at them, but I thought they were some great examples, and it's nice that they're close to home. So now we'll move on and we'll explore the Jazz Age. So the Jazz Age was a period of time of economic prosperity in the 20s. It ended with the Great Depression. This era was labeled for the jazz music and dance styles that were becoming popular primarily in the United States, but also in Britain at that time. This was a time that was driven by a distinctive cultural edge, redefining the modern look for British and American women in home decor and fashion. It was during this era that the Art Deco peaked. Also known as the Roaring 20s, this era was marked by a general feeling of novelty associated with a break from traditions. Everything seemed to be feasible through modern technology, especially automobiles, moving pictures, and radio. Formal decorative frills were shed in favor of practicality in both daily life and architecture. Wall colors were generally light neutrals and grays, with accessories and accents in vibrant colors like Chinese red and blue peacock. These extravagant pops of color reflected the individualism and freedom of self-expression that the youth were experiencing in this time frame. The fashion industry was led by Coco Chanel's use of beige and white, which ushered into the decade while incorporating the stark contrast of black lacquer and reflective metallic finishes. Art Deco, sometimes simply referred to as Deco, is a style of visual arts, architecture, and design that first appeared in France at the World Fair just before World War I. It became popular in the 1920s and 30s and influenced the design of buildings, furniture, jewelry, fashions, cars, movie theaters, trains, ocean liners, and everyday objects such as radios and even vacuum cleaners. Art Deco design represented modernism turned into fashion. This style took its name from the shortening of arts decorators that was introduced during the International Exhibition of Modern Decorative and Industrial Arts held in Paris in 1925. It is a combination of modernist style with fine craftsmanship and rich materials. During its heyday, Art Deco represented luxury, glamour, exuberance, and faith in the progress of technology. Art Deco was a blend of many different styles. Sometimes they were contradictory, united by the desire to be modern. It featured rare and expensive materials such as ebony and ivory. Let's take a look at a remarkable building, the Chrysler Building, featuring Art Deco style. It was constructed as the tallest building at the time. It was eventually surpassed by the Empire State Building 11 months after its construction, but you can really see that Deco style in the top of this, the architecture of the top there. Those curves and very clean. Deco held a very impactful but short span of time. In the early 30s, the Great Depression put an end to the exuberance of the Deco jazz period. Styles and colors became more subdued and muted, with multiple values deriving from the white and beige color families. This created a more practical and somber mood. New materials did arrive, though, including chrome plating, stainless steel, and plastic. Now we move on to modernism. So throughout the 30s and 40s, modernism combined international style, functional efficiency, and sophistication with a respect for customers' desires for physical and psychological comfort. Modernist designers began to develop products and lifestyle concepts intentionally intended for the middle-class consumer versus the elite. It was a cultural and philosophical movement that was shaped in part by the growth of industrialism and urban development, popularized by the rich colors with strong accents alongside the neutral shades and refined metal tones that reflected subtle influences of the American Southwest. Interior colors of the time were soft and dusty with creamy yellows, blued grays, soft pinks, and accents in deep forest green and burgundy. The shift to more extreme modernism was showcased at its best in the 1933 World's Fair hosted in Chicago. One interesting and enduring exhibit was the 1933 Homes of Tomorrow exhibition that demonstrated modern home convenience and creative, practical new building materials and techniques, with 12 model homes sponsored by several corporations affiliated with home decor and construction. We also saw the Bauhaus movement, inspiring modern and streamlined design, was making an impact. Its goal was to merge all artistic mediums into one unified approach, that of combining an individual's artistry with mass production and function. Bauhaus design is often abstract, angular, geometric, and with little ornamentation. Now we'll move into the 1950s, mid-century modern, and we did have some Scandinavian influences that made the most impact. It was an exuberant time. The US thrived in its post-war recovery, and the outlook was positive despite the Cold War with its looming nuclear threat. Dynamic designs were influenced by science, space exploration, and new and improved technologies. Room and furniture designs were innovative for their time, yet endured throughout the following decades because of their modern and classic appeal. Still, other 50s design trends fell out of favor over time, but are now experiencing a renewed popularity. Pastels were the norm, with pink and turquoise appliances adorning the kitchen and laundry room, but pops of color like lilac and chartreuse were popular. Modern colors were clean, bright, and included vibrant yellow, electric blue, orange, red, black, white. This is in contrast to the Scandinavian color scheme, which was sophisticated and heavily influenced by nature. Those color palettes included shades of beigey pink, cream, grays, and greens. For the first time ever, in the 1950s, paint colors were available in any possible hue. Now we'll talk a little bit about the mid-century modern architectural, interior product, and graphic design that describes the mid-20th century developments in modern design, architecture, and urban development. This happened between 1933 to 1965. The term employed as a style descriptor as early as the 1950s. The mid-century modern movement in the US was an American reflection of international and Bauhaus movements. Though the American component was slightly more organic in form and less formal than the international style, it is more firmly related to it than any other. Brazilian and Scandinavian architects were very influential at this time, with a style characterized by clean simplicity and interrogation with nature. Like many of Wright's designs, mid-century architecture was frequently employed in residential structures with the goal of bringing modernism into America's post-war suburbs. This style emphasized creating structures with ample windows and open floor plans with the intention of opening up interior spaces and bringing the outdoors in. Many mid-century houses utilized then groundbreaking post and beam architectural design that eliminated bulky support walls in favor of walls seemingly made of glass. Function was as important as form in mid-century designs, with the emphasis is placed specifically on targeting the needs of the average American family. Beginning in the early 19th century and fitting nicely with the post and beam architecture, Scandinavian design featured functionalist style buildings that were minimal, but also incorporated a very keen interest in the human condition. Architects wanted these buildings to be simple, but they also wanted them to be beneficial to people and nature in some thoughtful way. And then you can see the iconic Ames lounge chair that's still popular today. It symbolizes minimalist, modern functionality that represented the feel of mid-century modern. So Laura, that's what I have for our color palettes today, if you'd like to take over.
For sale, a new way of life. And they were right. A vibrant, modern twist was upon us, which comes full circle in today's design. Who knows? Maybe we trace back to this design trend, seeking the comfort in the colorful retreats that we created, honoring the evolving styles which have brought us here today. As you've seen, colors, palettes, and how they are used in design are ever changing. Influence through societal and cultural evolution is constantly changing by the way we perceive the spaces that we live in. Many times pulling from the past, but altering to make an entirely new color story for the future. Sherwin-Williams is very well aware of this and invests its time and money in understanding past trends to keep color arrangements on point with today's needs. We just traveled through well over 100 years of design history. Sherwin-Williams' historical palettes represent the true colors and their application throughout some of the most impactful movements in our nation and how now throughout the world. They are not just a replica of what existed, they were in fact part of building that history itself. Sherwin-Williams continues to be a leader in forecasting those trends, and we make it a priority to share it and educate our customers. The color mix presentation is a great tool that comes out every year and helps forecast those new color trends and explain them to our consumers. It explains the influences of these trends and provides also great inspiration. If you're working on your own project and need color assistance, we continue to be the leaders in color and offer help by giving free virtual color consultations. Simply visit swcolorconsult.com and have one of our color professionals help you with your space. Further information on our historical palettes is also available on our website. We thank you for your time and attention today.
Thank you both, Cindy and Laura. If anyone has any questions for either of them, please type those into the chat box and we'll get those answered shortly. I'll start off with my own question for either one of you, which would like to answer it. So let's just say I have a historic home and I'm interested in updating its color palette. And I want to get something more historically appropriate, let's just say for my Victorian home. What is the process really like when I meet with a color expert at Sherwin-Williams? How are we selecting colors and really how does that process work?
Absolutely. So, Cindy is one of those consultants, so I'll actually let her go ahead and answer that so she can walk you through that process.
Yes, this is what I do day in and day out, not necessarily Victorians, but all helping with all different kinds of color questions, making palettes for interior, exterior. I do have a lot of people that really need help with the Victorians, just understanding the history, understanding what's best for their home. So what you would do is you would sign up at our website, which is swcolorconsult.com. Fill out the information, and then you'll have an option to choose a time and a day to talk to one of our consultants. We have a really experienced team of people that take these calls and consults. And then we would ask you to send in some pictures, and maybe if you had some inspiration or something that might drive a color palette, we would ask that you share that. We do spend 30 minutes with you talking about where you are and where you need to go. Sometimes it'll be multiple consults because you'll start out, we'll curate a palette for you, and then you'll get the color chips in the mail. We send them to you in the mail for free. And then you'll have to take those outside and take a look at them in exterior lighting, get some feedback. And then because they're free and because we want you to be really happy with your finished result, we don't put a limit on the color consults for you. You can have as many as you need to feel comfortable. So then you would just hop back on the website again, sign up, and then we could continue on, with whatever phase you're at. So it's a really wonderful support if you're unsure of where to get started or where to go from a certain point. So.
And as Cindy is being modest, the team, especially herself, she has over 20 years specifically herself in the design industry with Sherwin-Williams. And I have a team of 15 individuals in the Midwest area. We have over 50 in the entire country that can help anyone in the United States, but specifically on our team in the Midwest division. So if you're signing up in Ohio, you would get someone on our team. They have backgrounds in interior design, graphic design. There's art history majors. There's artists. So really, really vast level of knowledge. And they're all trained on color trends as well through Sherwin-Williams on top of their prior experience. And they'll walk you through step by step that entire process. And we know there's some restrictions in some historical communities as well. So we'll help you and hold your hand through that too.
Thanks to both of you. So I have another question here. I'm going to break it up, Adrian, just so you know. I'm going to kind of split this up into two different questions here. So a lot of people have historic buildings, and a lot of them have black and white photos of what the building looked like. Is there any good way other than just, getting some paint thinner out and stripping down the paint layers down that people can get some more accurate ideas of what their historic building might have looked like?
Cindy, have you run into that yet?
I have not. I have had people wonder, but not be technically pursuing it. And we try to look at the prove it, like where was it? Where did it fit in the environment at the time? Um, you know, more than likely, if it's a light color, it's going to be one of the from the subdued and soft earth tone range. That would be difficult to know the true colors unless you did do some digging. You could take I've had people take a chip, a core sample to try to look at the layers and try to figure out where it started, but we have no way to trace the history on a house. That would probably be something our customers would have to do independently, through other sources. So.
But
Sure.
if you did,
And also,
yeah, if you did some of that. Oh, I'm sorry, I was going to jump in real quick. If you did
go ahead.
bring information to the consultants, I think as Cindy was saying, we'd be able to at least gear it towards, the period of the historical palettes, right? And dive into, okay, we know this is the mid-century modern palette, and at least hone it in from there.
Thank you. And kind of going off of the rest of Adrian's question, kind of morphing it a little bit. If somebody owns a commercial building, obviously it's a little bit different than residential. Do they have people at Sherwin-Williams that help with commercial pallets as well?
We absolutely do. So we have two different we'll call it segments in the design industry here. And first, my team is the residential side, right? But if you do have commercial side, we often suggest you get with a representative from our store. If you don't know who, if you already have one or you don't know who yours is, just walk into your local Sherwin-Williams standalone store, tell them about your property, and they'll set you up with a representative that will assist you and walk you through all that. We have a department at headquarters in Cleveland that is our commercial color marketing and design team. So what they do is they can provide color consultations as well, and even additional services such as rendering for those commercial properties. And that way you can get a better idea of what the large property would look like with the colors painted on it. Again, gives you an idea. We know the best way to sample colors is to actually look at the chip or paint sample right on the substrate.
Thank you. So this question, I think I've wondered this many times. Can you explain the popularity of the 1970s orange, yellow, and browns in a kind of social context?
Cindy, did you want to take that one?
Yes, sorry, I had muted myself. So I think as we saw, of course, they talked about the mid-century modern kind of moving up into the 60s. But what I don't know if you guys are seeing this, too, in a timeline like I do, because I do this every day. But we keep coming back to organic colors, but we always seem to want to hype that up a little bit. So I feel like the movement in the 50s to have those bright pops and that cheerfulness and that optimism blended with an organic palette is what developed the avocados and the oranges. Now, I have not vetted that out, but that is, we stopped at the 50s, but that would be what I would see as a natural progression for how we view colors. We're always trying to evolve. And I told Laura, one of the things that I see all the time now is with the internet, trends and colors are evolving so quickly, we can't even sit on them for a minute and play them out before somebody's thinking of something else. But back in the 70s, I feel like we were still wanting that pop and that exuberance of the 50s, but then it of course has to evolve. So we get into the the earth tones, which we always seem to come back to as a you know, as a culture, as a humanity seems to always come back to those earth tones and feeling very safe and connected with those. That would be my.
It's a good answer. So, typically when you see older buildings, most of the palette is sort of, the texture is matte a lot of the times. When did the other types like eggshell, gloss, all those other types really start coming about with paint?
So a lot of that was also, it evolved for function, not just style, right? So when we look at sheen, so when we talk about different glosses, it's about practicality as well and the longevity of the paint. So when we have a glossier surface, right, we can wipe that a little bit more aggressively than, let's say, historically a flatter surface. The great thing about Sherwin-Williams paint and how it has evolved over the years, though, is we're able now to, with technology's progression, we're able now to get those flatter finishes, which might be more historically true, and still have them be durable, wipeable, and washable. So those sheens, evolved as technology evolved with our paint, and really opened a lot of doors to make our paint more versatile for our customers, depending on what they needed that paint to be used for in their space.
Yeah, and I'd like to chip in too, just from the day-to-day out in the trenches here. The aesthetic is to go, especially with exterior, a little more matte or flat to have the color perception to be richer and deeper. Not that there isn't room for a nice glossy black door somewhere and something traditional, but for the most part, bodies of homes are going into these lower sheens, and thank goodness that Sherwin-Williams has developed the technology for these lower sheens to be more wearable, washable, durable, for us to use those lower sheens so we can capture that chalkier aesthetic that gives us better color perception and the depth and kind of thought back to original paint finishes,
Definitely. So we have a question here. It's more about the creation of paints. How do you deduce the mood of the country to develop a new color? How important is groupthink in determining the new color? This is a very loaded question here.
Can you repeat that one more time?
Sure. So how do you deduce the mood of the country into developing a new paint color and it color? How important is the general consensus of the nation here developing new colors in America?
That's a really great question. So I guess let me touch on it. If I don't answer part of this properly, please let me know if this is not what you're looking for. But when we're talking about developing a new color, are we talking about? I guess I have a follow-up. Are we talking about at Sherwin-Williams, or are we talking about
anywhere technically? But let's just say Sherwin-Williams. Like really,
okay.
how are we forecasting the new it colors for
Sure.
the next year?
Okay, there we go. So so our team, our color marketing and design team that I had mentioned a bit ago, who helps with the commercial projects. We have a director of color marketing and design. Her name is Sue Wadden, and she and her team travel all around the world to attend things like fashion shows. The Olympics was a huge part of actually forecasting color trends. And what they do is they realize that not all these trends, they don't just derive from home fashion, they actually derive from apparel, right? Fashion. So one year, let's go with, there was like monkeys were I remember this because I remember it being so strange. Monkeys were really, really popular in these like dresses at this huge fashion show in Paris. And all of a sudden they developed more monkey wallpaper, right? And I'm not kidding, the colors derived from that wallpaper, the monkeys themselves, this all became popular, but it all derives from the world of fashion. So Sue and her team, they go around and they travel the world, and obviously they do their research. They have backgrounds in art history, they're interior designers. They go and they pull all these ideas together and essentially trap themselves in, I think it's like a room for quite a few weeks, and they go over everything with idea boards, and they look at other things like what metals are popular. You know, we have a lot of the blush tones that have derived from the rose gold popularity as well. So they pull all these together, sit down, and they come up with that color mix forecast. And they present that generally. You'll see presentations. If you look on SWCE Learn, you'll see them starting to come out around October. And anyone can go online and attend those to actually see the color forecast and the predictions for the following year. And it's really amazing how accurate our color forecasting team is. Every year, I'm just absolutely amazed. And then we'll come up with a color of the year too. The color of the year is often derived from that color mix palette. You'll always have that color there. And there'll be a big focus around that color throughout the entire year. You'll see that in a lot of magazines. Again, I'll open up HGTV magazine and there it is. It's amazing what that team just predicted. As far as creating colors, you know, we try to make sure that our palettes stay on point and they're trendy. So we do retire some colors. They're always going to be in our system. Don't worry, we can always make them. And the teams make sure that they freshen them up when necessary and pull in different palettes, or we even create new palettes. Like we have a new partnership with Christian Siriano, and we have our Emerald Designer Edition palette. So these are all new things that we've brought in the past few years just to make sure that we're always staying on point and on trend. And as far as the names go, well, you know, that's everyone's dream job, right? I want to make the color names up.
Thanks. So kind of going down this lane a little bit more, Susan's asking, and I think a lot of people are probably thinking this too in general, and the gray pellets, you know, they've been so popular for so long, sort of driven by HGTV. Do you see this trend still continuing? Is it starting to wane in America?
I'm going to give this one to Cindy.
Yeah, I see it every day. You know, I've been here every day. We went to virtual right after at COVID, so we've been in virtual for 3 years and really looking at large areas of the country. The Midwest Division here runs from Ohio to Washington State and Oregon. So the Dakotas, everything, Wyoming, everything across there. So it's been interesting to watch it. I don't know that I could ever buy this education. You just have to live it. But yeah, the true grays, the cool true grays, a lot of people are not going there. I personally feel like there's a striving for warmth, comfort, peacefulness. There's a lot of, I tell people, oh, you know, we don't want a lot of speed bumps, right? In the house, we're going to flow with one color. Of course, you'll always have your decor thoughts on this, but I'm seeing people looking for comforting. And so they're not going all the way into like the old school beiges that we had before, but they're hovering on the warm side of greyage, the cool side of beige. We're specifying a lot of accessible beige, shiitake, river's edge. It's very interesting. Even the trim colors, I mean, pure white was the trim color, extra white, pure white. And now we're getting a lot of discussion on alabaster and even creamy and warmer, not completely like into the yellows, but just warmer trends. I also am seeing that in the natural wood floors that are becoming available. See, that will drive too, where people are using the honey, you know, clear stained pine and honey colors and things like that on the flooring. And so you can't, it's difficult to put grays with that. The blue gray, I still have people that want a blue gray house. They've finally gotten around to painting. They're going to do their exterior blue gray come hell or high water, but it's less. It's a lot less. People want warmth. So I'm not at HGTV. I'm not on Sue's team, but I'm telling you what I see. Warm grays, soft grays, grisages, cooler beiges. That's where we are right now. Did that answer it?
I think so. It's a pretty interesting topic. One kind of, sort of going down this vein, one more on it. What are really, giving an example from either of you, what is the weirdest or most surprising color trend you've seen during your time working in color? That kind of just like, huh, that's weird.
Well, do you have one, Laura? Because one comes to mind for me.
You go first.
Okay, so I was asked to present a color mix some years ago. The DAE who normally presented it couldn't do it, so they asked if I would, so I had to research it. And it was all this very macabre, goth, purples, blacks, super spooky, like, very, very, but I kind of liked it, somehow it spoke to the Victorian in me. But anyway, I remember presenting it and I was interested, and there was ravens as influencers and tombstones and floaty figures, and things like that. And I was like, ooh, this is cool. But I watched my audience could not connect, right? So I was like, okay, this isn't, this is too out there. But fortunately with Color Mix, they have multiple palettes, but that one palette just didn't quite take. I thought it was kind of cool, but it didn't. It didn't quite make it. Now I know that some people are doing all black houses, really getting into that, what they call it, murder the house, where all the trim's black, the house is black, that Japanese charred wood kind of look, but obviously done with paint. They're not charring their house. So I guess it's kind of coming back, but somehow that whole macabre goth tombstone thing just didn't make it.
I don't have anything off the wall. Cindy does this every day, but I will show some humility here and say that I've struggled a little bit this year in the beginning of getting into the color of the year. And it's red and point. It's blush. Beige was blush, right? And I said, are we really going back there? Are we really going back to the pinky beiges? Because that's where I remember 3 years ago yelling at my mother-in-law that she needed to change the color in her powder room. I said, there is so much pink in that beige, it needs to go. It just needs to go. And then all of a sudden, this color came out, and I fell absolutely in love with it. So it's amazing, as I mentioned, how accurate our team is at predicting these trends. And I don't like things just because they're trendy, but really the softness and the subtleness. And I think as Cindy was talking about the comfort to some of these softer hues, I literally said, this is like a warm hug. I need to paint this all over my house. But, sometimes it takes a little time to digest a color. So even the craziest of colors, or, I love chartreuse on a front door. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but it's amazing how our taste evolves too in time. So, but I don't have anything crazy like that, Cindy. Just how we evolve every day with color.
This is pretty good answers. All right, I'm not seeing any more questions from anyone, so I'd like to thank both Cindy and Laura once again and the Sherwin-Williams team for partnering with us today on this webinar. It was great having you guys here, some great conversation about color. And if anyone needs any color help out there, please reach out to Sherwin-Williams. They'd be happy to help you all. Thank you once again for attending today's webinar, everyone, and we hope to see you at the next one. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.